Hello and welcome to Analysis with me, Jonathan Steele. Afghanistan goes to the polls this weekend in what will be the country's first ever democratic transfer of power, as President Hamid Karzai steps down after 13 years as president of the embattled country. Out of the 8 candidates in the running, 3 frontrunners are the former Foreign Minister Abdullah and Zalmay Rasool, also a former Foreign Minister, and the former Finance Minister Ashraf Ghani. But the country has seen a string of Taliban attacks in recent days which have targeted the election, relating to buildings in particular. The most striking was the attack on the Independent Election Commission's headquarters, where reports say that 5 Taliban militants were killed. However, voter registration centres, another potential target, have been crammed with people seizing their last chance to secure a voter identity card. And many experts say that the Taliban's assaults, mostly on civilian targets with no connection to the election, have made them more determined to cast a ballot. So can free and fair elections take place in Afghanistan? And is the imminent withdrawal of NATO from the country having any effect at all on the poll? Joining me in the studio to discuss this are Nazifa Hakpal, Second Secretary of the Human Rights and Women's Affairs Desk in the British Afghan Embassy, the Afghan Embassy in Britain, and Dr. Mohammed Hotak, President of the British Afghan Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And by Skype, we're joined by William Reeve, a former BBC Kabul correspondent in Afghanistan. Welcome to you all. But first, let's take a look at this video report.
As the smoke rose from Kabul's Independent Election Commission over the weekend, it was clear that the threat of the Taliban still hangs over the election cycle in Afghanistan. The election is mooted as the first democratic transfer of power in Afghan history. The Taliban call it a sham, and have vowed to disrupt the event in any way possible, with the attack on the Election Commission being the most high-profile so far. However, no civilian casualties were reported from the attack.
5 people wearing burqas entered the building. Fortunately, all of them were killed by our forces and 2 policemen were slightly wounded.
The Commission says that the attack will not disrupt its operations this weekend. However, there are growing concerns in the country about the rate of electoral fraud that can be expected. In 2009, approximately 1 million votes were disqualified. Opinion polls say that only a quarter of Afghans think the election will be clean. Despite this, the Electoral Commission has urged people to cast their vote.
I announce that we are committed to hold the election, and I call on our honourable people to participate in big numbers and cast their vote for their favourite candidate.
And despite the threat of the Taliban and voter cynicism, registration centres have reportedly been full, with people seizing their chance to secure a voter identity card. And many experts say that the Taliban's assaults, mostly on civilian targets with no connection to the election, have made them more determined to cast their ballot. Whatever the result is on Saturday, and in the runoff that is likely to follow, Afghanistan looks set to move into uncharted territory. Nathaniel Sansom, Islam Channel.
Okay, Mohammed Hotak, let me start with you. I mean, polls, opinion polls in Afghanistan are not terribly reliable, but who do you think is going to win?
I mean, the recent polls that we had, both in Afghanistan, held by the Afghans and by foreign observers, show that Ashraf Ghani has been leading. So that's what the polls have been showing. And I think he has been campaigning really hard. And I think he is the man who's going out to the people, somebody that the public trusts. And I think somebody who has got a good chance and probably be the next president of Afghanistan.
Of course, the system is a 2-round system. If somebody doesn't get 50% plus 1 in the first round, do you think Ashraf Ghani will actually make it in the first round?
You know, that's a very good question, to be honest, and I don't think anyone would be able to answer that precisely, but we know that there are 3 very important candidates still in the race. As you mentioned, Abdullah, Zalmay Rasool, and Dr. Ashraf Ghani himself. I think there's a very good chance that the polls might go into a second round, or it might be that we will have a clear winner, which, if it goes according to the polls, will be Ashraf Ghani. So that's as much as I could probably say at this time.
Well, William Reeve, I mean, you've watched a lot of elections in Afghanistan. The last one, of course, was marred by terrible fraud. Do you think there's less danger of that this time?
It's difficult to say at this stage. There was fraud on both sides last time. It's not just on one side. I mean, the reports that Most of the fraud was on the side of President Karzai last time, but then there were more people actually voting for him by all accounts. It's difficult to say. One thing that is very clear is that Afghans, despite all the threats from the Taliban and the recent attacks from the Taliban, people do actually want to go out and vote and have their say.
And Nazifa, do you think these Taliban attacks will actually be a deterrent? I mean, how serious is it?
I think they will try, but they will not succeed, because there are two reasons behind it. Number one is that the Afghanistan National Security Forces are capable to defend and to secure the environment for the registration and for the election. It is the evidence of the campaign, a campaign of the candidate during the 60 days, where is one of the evidence that the security forces are capable for providing security. And the other issue is that the people of Afghanistan are supporting and cooperating for the election, and they are taking step forward with the enthusiasm to participate in the election. So I believe that the Taliban will try, as they have announced, and as they have with a very desperate attacks, they have tried to on different, like you mentioned, on election commission and many more, but they will not achieve any success for this. Yeah.
Let me come back, Mohammed Hotak, to you and ask you about Karzai's future. I mean, he's not going to be president anymore after the summer, but will he still retain a strong political role, do you think?
I think that President Karzai has played a very important role in where Afghanistan is today. I'm sure Afghanistan is not in a perfect situation, but Afghanistan is a lot better than it was in 2001. Karzai has got a lot of experience. He can act as a mentor, as a guide for the next president or for the next government. But as far as his political relevance is concerned, there is still a lot of people in Afghanistan who really respect Karzai and they stand by him. How relevant would he be after the elections would depend on how relevant he wants to be. We know he has got a place in the ARG, and he has said that he would like to go around the world to promote Afghanistan and provide any advice that he could to the future president for the good of Afghanistan. So that's what I think he would probably do.
It rather depends who wins the election, because, I mean, Abdullah was his opponent in 2009. They can't be terribly friendly. And similarly, Ashraf Ghani ran against him in 2009. So if either of those two win, won't there be rather strained relations with Karzai?
I agree, but we should also understand that, you know, those kind of political rivalries exist all over the world. But at the end of the day, it's about Afghanistan. And President Karzai, as an Afghan, I'm sure would rather use his experience and knowledge and the upcoming president to work together for Afghanistan than actually totally not cooperate or anything, which would be not so good for Afghanistan. So I believe that regardless of who comes into power, they would look at Karzai not somebody who was against them, but somebody that they can work with for the better future of Afghanistan.
And William, what about the role of NATO troops? I mean, Karzai has refused to sign the security agreement that would allow American troops and other foreign troops to remain longer after the end of this year. Will any of these candidates take the same line, or are they going to sign the agreement, do you think?
It's unknown, but from all accounts, it would appear that they would sign it. And quite frankly, it's in many ways, it's up to them to sign it, because they will be the president at that time. And Karzai is holding out for various reasons, some of them unknown to us. But he wants to show himself to be president of Afghans rather than being, say, a stooge of foreigners at the moment, among many other things. It's a very complicated picture, I think, his signing or not signing of this particular document. But as far as what happens when foreign troops move on, I was in Afghanistan in October and December, and just really talking to Afghans, not just in Kabul, but up in the north of the country and so forth. And there's a whole spectrum of what people feel will happen. No doubt Nazifa and Mohammed know much better than me, but The broad spectrum within the middle, there was a sort of muddle through. I don't think there's going to be a civil war. So the Taliban certainly won't take over the country. And the powerful warlords who hold sway in so many parts of Afghanistan, I don't think they certainly don't want a civil war, because they'd lose all the money and wealth that they've gained in the meantime.
Well, you talk about powerful warlords. I mean, one of them, of course, is Abdul Rashid Dostum, who's Ashraf Ghani's vice presidential running mate. I mean, isn't that a rather odd marriage that I believe Ghani even called Dostum a known killer at one point? I mean, how come they can be running together? And is that a really good omen for Afghanistan?
Well, I was actually in Kabul when all the presidential candidates and their running mates were announced. And many journalists sort of were saying that Ashraf Ghani has sold his ticket to the devil, so to speak. But then others, in the fullness of time, realised that it was actually thanks to the Uzbek vote, which comes with General Dostum, that got Karzai elected in the last round. And quite frankly, with all due respect to Vice President Fahim, who's sadly recently died, I mean, he was very much in the same sort of bracket as a warlord as General Dostum. So it's not just Ashraf Ghani, it would have been Karzai himself as well that was having the same type of running mate. And it's having General Dostum as his running mate is the one way that Ashraf Ghani can get into the final round of the voting, in my view and most people's view, which is what he wants to do. And once he gets into the final round of voting, if he does, which does seem likely at the moment, I agree with Mohammed and certainly his analysis earlier. Once he gets in, he then picks up the Pashtun vote. So it's a question of how Ashraf Ghani would get into the final second round, and that the only way he could do that was by having General Dostum as his running mate.
Well, Nazif, let me come back to you on the issue of fraud. There are the Independent Electoral Commission, and I think there's also some kind of complaints commission as well. Are they really independent? I mean, last time there was a lot of accusation that they were not really, that they were too strongly linked to the president.
I think, yes, they are independent because we recently have seen the announce of the commission about finding some of the candidates recently that they were
finding.
Yeah. There was some allegation on these candidates. I will not name them, but I'm sure that the audience will have their research, or they can find it from independent news agencies. So very independently, the commission find these candidates for that. Regarding the fraud, there are mechanisms that the commission has working with other stakeholders in order to avoid the fraud. But as this time the selection, the commission has more experts because this is the second or the third round of the election that they are holding. So I believe that they will try their best to reduce the fraud, but usually we cannot deny that there might be also some of them.
Isn't there a problem in rural areas, particularly about women voting? Don't tribal leaders or village leaders of one kind or another sometimes literally deliver a whole lot of votes to the election station, claiming that the women can't leave the house, therefore they're bringing the votes with them, and that obviously opens the way to potential manipulation and fraud?
I think on those sites which has declared the security, or those sites that due to this insecurity and due to the fraud, because insecurity also leads the fraud. The independent commission, they closed that centers, that polling centers, and they added that polling centers, and it's almost around 800. So I believe that this 800 polling center which was closed is because of the insecurity and fraud, and the rest around 6,000 polling centers, the fair and free election will be conducting there.
And is that a larger number of polling stations closed because of insecurity than last time, or is it less?
I think it's less. The recent Ministry of Interior announcement shows that it's 90% of the polling centers are open, which is better than previous election.
Well, let me come to Mohammed on this issue of the Taliban attack on the Election Commission headquarters. I mean, that was a pretty brazen thing, and shouldn't the security have been better around, obviously, what is a very sensitive building?
Exactly. I think the Afghan security agencies are doing their utmost to prevent any attacks on civilians and as well as the election process teams. But as we know that the Taliban know that this is the most important event in the history of Afghanistan, and they will try to derail it as much as they can. And even today, coming to this program, there was some breaking news from different people that I know on their Twitter accounts, actually, that there has been an attack on the Ministry of Interior this morning. So I think Taliban are using their full force, and as the Zifa said, they will do whatever they can to derail this historical event that's taking place in Afghanistan, because this is what Afghans want. And I think they have totally failed, and they will fail again. Afghanistan, I think, has come out from the past and is going towards a new future. And I think the Afghan security forces and Afghanistan's organizations have much more better capacity and experience now compared to even the last elections, and let alone talking about 2001. So there would be these attacks, and the security agencies are taking full precautions to make sure to prevent them, but there is so much that they could do.
William, we've only got about 2 minutes left in this first segment of the programme. Let me ask you again about Karzai's future and so on. I mean, it was said that he supports Zalmay Rasul, the former foreign minister, because he's also supported by his brother, who initially was a candidate. I mean, do you see that as the correct analysis? Is Rasul President Karzai's candidate?
Yes, I think very much so. He's certainly being looked upon that by all those near to him. And I mean, he's worked very closely. Rasul's been close to him in government all the way through since Karzai formed his government. And he's closest, certainly closer than Abdullah or Hamid or Ashraf Ghani. But I do agree with Mohammed that I think Karzai, whoever does win, I think Karzai would be very much like to take on the position of sort of father of the nation, Baba as the nation, as Afghans call it, to try and help whoever the actual winner of the election is. And I think that would be the final analysis.
And that would be a positive thing, you think?
I think it would. Yes, I think it would. And he's been president for 13 years, and as your guest was saying before, he does have a lot of respect from a lot of Afghans, and I think. In the fullness of time, after he's stepped down, I think he will probably be respected maybe even more. It's difficult to say at this stage, but that's what I think at this present. And he'll be looked upon as a sort of person in the background helping the new president to do as best he can.
Well, on that note, I think we'll have to end the first segment. In the second segment, we'll be talking about human rights in more detail and women's rights, and also the whole issue, which is not as live as it used to be, but is still in the background of talks with the Taliban and whoever emerges as the new president of Afghanistan. So stay with us.